A few years ago in Miami, Florida, the Dade County District Attorney indicted all the officers of a bank called the World Finance Corporation. He charged that they were knowingly, not accidentally, or while their backs were turned, or while they were in the John jacking off or anything like that, but knowingly and deliberately running the biggest cocaine money laundromat ever uncovered in legal history. The World Finance Corporation, the DA claimed, was not just a bank that occasionally laundered cocaine money. It was a bank set up deliberately to launder cocaine money, and everything else was side interest. He claimed all of the major cocaine suppliers in South America were using the World Finance Corporation to launder their money. The DA managed to convict 4 executives of the bank. He charged that the CIA interfered with his investigation and prevented him from fully exploring the background of 8 other officers of the bank. More water. All 8 of whom were former members of the CIA. What does former member of the CIA mean? There is the literalist interpretation, and in Berkeley you've all read Idries Shah, and you know you should never trust the literalist interpretation of anything. The literalist interpretation is a former CIA agent is somebody who's quit the agency and has no contact with them anymore. And then there's the esoteric interpretation, or the allegorical interpretation, which is that a former CIA agent is somebody who's been assigned to something so dirty the agency doesn't want it traced back to them. And so he's officially not on the books anymore, but he's being paid through a numbered bank account in Switzerland. Well, anyway, these 8 were former CIA agents. The president of the bank was named Hernandez Cataya, who was a CIA agent involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion. One of the most interesting parts of the Watergate tapes is when Nixon is discussing... these people want to make a tape, and I got to keep it on so they can make the tape. In the Watergate tapes, Nixon is talking about Howard Hunt's demand for $1 million. And even on that level, $1 million bribe is a lot of money. And Nixon says, I can get $1 million. I know how to do that. And then he says, we've got to pay Hunt. He might let that whole Bay of Pigs thing out of the bag. Now, what Bay of Pigs thing was Nixon talking about? By 1973, I thought we knew everything, all the scandals possible about the Bay of Pigs. But apparently we did not. In 1973, there was still something about the Bay of Pigs that we did not know, and Nixon was willing to pay $1 million to cover it up. And we still don't know it, because nothing new has come out about the Bay of Pigs since then that I'm particularly aware of. But Hernandez Cataya was involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion, and he was running this cocaine laundromat in Miami. Also involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion was Howard Hunt, who got $1 million for keeping his mouth shut about what he knew. Or he got part of $1 million. His wife got part of the money, allegedly $100,000. She was in a strange plane crash, remember? In which the pilot's blood was found to be full of cyanide. And the $100,000 had turned into $10,000 by the time the plane crashed. If you want more data on that, read The Yankee and Cowboy War by Carl Oglesby. Hunt has an interesting face, a very memorable face. He was on Jack Anderson's special on the JFK assassination a couple of weeks ago on TV. The most fascinating thing about Howard Hunt's face is that there were 3 tramps who were arrested on the grassy knoll in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And one of the tramps looks astonishingly like Howard Hunt, which I'm sure everybody in Berkeley has heard about by now. On Jack Anderson's special, he had Howard Hunt on and asked him directly, are you that man in that picture? And Hunt says, absolutely not. I was in Washington that day. Well, that settles it. A CIA agent wouldn't lie about what he was doing on November 22nd, 1963. It is strange, though, that one of the other tramps looks like James Earl Ray, who later shot Martin Luther King. But the world is full of coincidences, or propinquities, or synchronicities, or whatever they are. Anyway, you might wonder what the World Finance Corporation... I think it's easier this way. I prefer the glare to not seeing what's happening around me at all. Dark glasses are great in the daytime, but at night you're practically blind with them. The World Finance Corporation, according to the evidence developed by the Dade County District Attorney and presented to the grand jury of Dade County, was sending all the cocaine money to the Cisalpine Bank in the Bahamas. The Cisalpine Bank in the Bahamas was jointly owned by Archbishop Paul Marcinkus, who was the manager of the Vatican Bank, and as a matter of fact still is the manager of the Vatican Bank. And the co-owner was Roberto Calvi, who was the president of Banco Ambrosiano in Milan. Now, I don't want to make this too complicated. We'll try to keep it simple. Marcinkus and Calvi, two simple names. Marcinkus, the Vatican Bank; Calvi, the Banco Ambrosiano. Calvi was indicted for laundering heroin money for the Gray Wolves. The Gray Wolves are a fascinating example of domesticated primate psychology. We got a lot of equivalents of them in this country. They are Islamic fundamentalists. They believe that Allah is the real name of God. I know a lot of you here have heard the real name of God is Jehovah, but that was invented by a German scholar in the 19th century who didn't know how to read Hebrew. According to the Jews, the real name of God is Yahweh, but you shouldn't say it aloud because you might get struck by lightning. Nothing happened. But according to the Arabs, the real name is Allah. And the Gray Wolves are on intimate speaking terms with Allah, and Allah has a real hard-on against Israel. Allah believes that Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth. And the Gray Wolves are trying to carry out the will of Allah, which isn't easy because Israel is getting such heavy support from the United States and has the best military machine in the Near East and has lots of money. And so the Gray Wolves, to do the will of Allah, have to raise money of their own, one way or another, to carry on the battle against Israel. And so they engage in selling heroin. Well, why not? If it's the will of Allah, the end justifies the means, right? Of course, you can make a lot of money out of heroin, but occasionally you got to go in for sidelines if you need a lot of money quick. So the Gray Wolves also farm themselves out as assassins for anybody who wants to hire an assassin. Well, if it's the will of God, there can't be anything wrong with it. They also run guns for other terrorists. They've been connected with the PLO and the IRA and the whole alphabet soup of terrorist groups in Europe. One of the Gray Wolves tried to shoot the Pope a couple of years ago, Mehmet Ali Agca. But anyway, the Gray Wolves run heroin, and some of the heroin was going through Banco Ambrosiano, run by Calvi. Calvi was also accused of embezzling funds from his own bank and knowingly receiving for deposit counterfeit stocks. The counterfeit stocks came in several batches, but the biggest batch was $1 billion in counterfeit stocks printed by the Johnny Roselli mafia family in Las Vegas. How many of you have ever heard of Johnny Roselli before? Okay, so this isn't getting too complicated. Some of you can follow me. Johnny Roselli is in many places one of the leading suspects in the JFK assassination. Johnny Roselli was involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was a prominent member of the American Mafia all of his life. He started out as a gunman for Al Capone in Chicago in the 1920s. And at the end of his career, he had risen to the level where he controlled the whole mafia organization throughout the state of Nevada. In 1961 and 62, he was working for the CIA, like many person in need of funds has found themselves working for the CIA. Johnny Roselli was hired by the CIA to arrange the assassination of Fidel Castro. Now, some of the things you read about the mafia in my books, among others, give you the impression they're infallible. No man can escape the mafia. Well, apparently, like a lot of other highly advertised organizations, they don't live up to their reputation because they tried 8 times to kill Fidel Castro, and unless the Cubans have some actor with a fake beard, they failed every time. Roselli told Jack Anderson that he was not involved in the Kennedy assassination when Anderson asked him directly, but Roselli said he knew which mafia family did do the job. Roselli was called to testify before the House Select Committee on Assassinations. He testified inconclusively. They then subpoenaed him to come back and testify again, and then he was shot. Oh, well, people get shot every day. According to Roselli's testimony to Anderson and to Congress, one of the main organizers of the Kennedy assassination was Sam Giancana in Chicago, the head of the mafia in Chicago. Sam Giancana had a particular grudge against Kennedy because he was largely responsible for Kennedy winning in 1960. 1960 was one of the closest races in American political history, and the reason Kennedy won instead of Nixon, the reason we didn't have Nixon 8 years earlier, which might have been good for us if we got it over sooner, we might have recovered sooner. The reason Kennedy won was that he carried Chicago, and Chicago gave him Illinois, and Illinois put him over the top. It was one of the closest elections in American history, as some of you may remember. The final results weren't announced until the day after election at around noon, as a matter of fact. Sam Giancana delivered Chicago to Kennedy. That was a deal that was worked out by Frank Sinatra. Isn't that amazing? Now, how many of you realize you owe Frank Sinatra the fact you had 1,000 days of John Kennedy? Yeah, Frank Sinatra said to Sam Giancana, this whole feud between you and the Kennedys, it can be ended. Let me make peace. And he arranged a meeting between John Kennedy and Sam Giancana, and Sam Giancana agreed to deliver Chicago, and Kennedy agreed to lay off on the mafia. Somewhere along the way, somebody changed his mind, and after Kennedy was elected, he unleashed Bobby as Attorney General and started giving even more problems to the mafia. So Sam Giancana was heard on several occasions to say that it would be better if they hadn't given Chicago to Kennedy, and it would be better still if Kennedy was removed from the White House as quickly as possible. That was also the opinion of Carlos Masella, the mafia chieftain of Miami, who said that if we cut off the head, we don't have to worry about the tail, meaning the way to get rid of Bobby Kennedy was to get rid of John Kennedy. All of this is covered in a number of books and on Jack Anderson's TV special, which is coming up on TV every couple of weeks. Another station picks it up and re-shows it. If you haven't seen it yet, try to catch it the next time. Anyway, Johnny Roselli, who's so interestingly involved in the Bay of Pigs and in the mafia's attempts to assassinate John F. Kennedy, which may or may not have been the prime factor in Dealey Plaza that day, Johnny Roselli printed up $1 billion worth of counterfeit stocks, which went to the Vatican Bank. Archbishop Marcinkus signed for the $1 billion in counterfeit stocks. There are many sincere Catholics in the world who cannot believe that the manager of the Vatican Bank and an archbishop of the church could engage in such activities. It is possible that Marcinkus did not know he was ordering counterfeit stocks. Maybe he thought he was ordering baby booties. When he received $1 billion in counterfeit stocks, I don't know why he didn't write back and say, hey, I wanted baby booties. Maybe he was absent-minded. He accepted the $1 billion in counterfeit stock, and most of it got shipped over to the Banco Ambrosiano, which was run by Roberto Calvi. Roberto Calvi was the man who owned the Cisalpine Bank in the Bahamas, together with Archbishop Marcinkus. It was the Cisalpine Bank in the Bahamas through which all the cocaine money came from the World Finance Corporation in Miami. The system by which the Banco Ambrosiano laundered heroin money for the Grey Wolves And the Cisalpine Bank in the Bahamas laundered cocaine money from South America, and it all ran through the Vatican Bank under the supervision of Archbishop Marcinkus. This whole system was organized by a man named Licio Gelli. How many people here have heard of Licio Gelli? One of the most influential men of the 20th century, and it looks like hardly anybody in the audience ever heard of him.